Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the book launch for Sara Kathryn Arledge, Serene for the Moment. We are coming to you sort of from the Armory Center for the Arts, located in Pasadena, California. And before we start, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement regarding the land that the Armory is on in Pasadena. We acknowledge that this land was founded on exclusions and erasures of indigenous people, that it was once called Tovangar, and that it is the unceded territory of the Kizh, Gabrielino Tongva, and Fernandeño Tataviam peoples. We pay our respects to these communities and express gratitude for their stewardship, recognizing that they are the traditional caretakers of the land we now occupy. Crafting a meaningful land acknowledgement requires time, and we acknowledge that we have a lot to learn as we consider this land and the confluence of legacies that bring us here. We are here tonight to celebrate the book. My name is Irene Tsatsos. I am the Director of Exhibition Programs and Chief Curator at the Armory Center for the Arts, and the curator of the exhibition that preceded this book, which is right here in front of Sarah herself. Serene for the Moment, Sara Kathryn Arledge. An absolutely beautiful book. I'm very excited to be talking about it tonight with some of the contributors to the book, including Sasha Archibald and Sarah McColl, whose texts we'll be hearing them read from tonight, and as well as the artists Nicole Kelly and Johanna Hedva, who are here across the digital divide, but not on screen with us tonight. In addition to those four authors, the book includes texts, includes an interview with Terry Cannon, an early champion of Arledge's work, and someone I'll mention a little bit more in a moment, and Arledge's own memoir called Madness and Memory, as well as lavish illustrations. Also tonight with us is Kimberly Varela of Content Object, the graphic designer of the book, and I look forward to speaking with her as well. And we have a special event with artist Julia Orkea Bianco, who is an Armory teaching artist and who will facilitate an Arledge-inspired art-making event, which is interactive and optional. But if you do want to proceed, participate, gather some paper, some markers, pens, pencils, and some glue or tape, and some scissors. It's very readily accessible material, and a fun and inspiring event. We also want to encourage you to participate in the chat. Feel free to jump in and say hello. We are hoping for room for a Q&A toward the end of this event, so if you have questions along the way, please put those in as well. We will also be dropping into the chat the link periodically on how to acquire the book through the Armory. I want to make some acknowledgments. Many people were involved in this book and in the exhibition. I want to acknowledge, in addition to the authors and the designer who I mentioned a moment ago, I want to acknowledge manuscript editor Stacy Allen with Elizabeth Pulcinelli, the photography of Ian Byers-Gamber. We're very grateful to the Sara Kathryn Arledge Memorial Trust, as well as to Karen Hillenberg for their generous support, Molly Munger for her generous support, as well as Nisha Warfield. We are also grateful to the Pasadena Art Alliance for their major support of the exhibition itself. Early encouragement, leaps of faith, came from Max Brennan and Sigrid Burton, as well as Alexandra Grant. And I would also like to offer additional thanks and appreciation to Emma Gray of Five Car Garage. I mentioned the Sara Kathryn Arledge Memorial Trust. There's so much story in Sara Kathryn Arledge's life, and we won't have time for all of it tonight, of course, but I do want to mention and acknowledge the trust, which was founded by Terry Cannon, Mary Cannon, Marcia Nunnery, and Ed Nunnery. The brief backstory is that Terry Cannon had founded Pasadena Film Forum, now known as Los Angeles Film Forum, and back in the 80s, he was introduced to Arledge through her film work. A mutual friend recognized that they would appreciate meeting each other and made the introduction. And from there, Terry learned that Arledge produced an extraordinary quantity of works on paper and learned more about the relationship of her filmmaking to her painting. And she became known for her filmmaking through the work of and advocacy of Terry Cannon, and this exhibition and publication also really centered her works on paper as well. We started, before we opened tonight, we were presenting some slides, really paintings on glass that Arledge made. These are, what you were seeing were digital copies of hand-painted, large format glass transparencies that she painted in Pasadena and later in Berkeley when she was teaching up there. Terry Cannon aptly described them as akin to viewing a shimmering stained glass window. I was fortunate to see these slides in person and can say that the experience of them in person is really quite astonishing and all-consuming, and you will hear more about that too. Adam Hyman, the current director of LA Film Forum, presented all of Arledge's films in a very special, during the course of our exhibition, in a very special event at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. And now all of her films, there's a rare opportunity to see all of her films as well as a digital presentation of many of her transparencies at the Berkeley Art Museum Pacific Film Archive, BAMFA, through April 11th. In tandem with that, another conversation about Arledge will take place this coming Sunday and will include artist Terry Latela reading from Arledge's memoir, as well as excerpts of my interview with Terry Cannon read by Adam Hyman. So if after tonight you want even more live representation of the book, as well, of course, in addition to buying the book, you can go to BAMFA's website at BAMFA, BAMPFA.org, and find out information about how to see those films and participate in this event on Sunday. I want to extend my thanks to BAMFA, which holds a significant portion of Arledge's archives and all of the film and glass transparencies. I particularly want to thank film curator Kathy Garretts and film archivist John Shibata, along with former director Larry Rinder and former film collection curator Mona Nagai. There were many other people at BAMFA that were extremely supportive of this project, and I worked most closely with the four of them. I want to now introduce our first reader tonight, Sasha Archibald, who contributed an extended biographical essay on Arledge. Sara Archibald writes essays about aesthetics and visual culture. Her work has appeared in The White Review, The Point, Cabinet, The Believer, Long Form, East of Borneo, Extra, The New Inquiry, and Los Angeles Review of Books, among others, and has been commissioned by institutions including the Walker Center in Minneapolis, Kulturgest in Porto, Portugal, the Parish Art Museum in Watermill, New York, Headland Center for the Arts in Sausalito, and the Museo d'Art Contemporani de Barcelona. In addition to her writing practice, Sasha is a curator and nonprofit arts worker, most recently as director of public programs at Clock Shop in Los Angeles. She was a curatorial fellow in the Whitney Museum Independent Study Program and is an editor-at-large at Cabinet. In 2019, she participated in the Andy Warhol Foundation Art Writing Workshop. She teaches critical studies at Pacific Northwest College of Art. Just last month, in February 2021, she published an extraordinary text a very moving piece called On Women's Land. It's a history of the 1970s separatist lesbian community in rural Southern Oregon, and appears in Places Journal. And with that, I would like to welcome you, Sasha, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Irene. And I'd also like to thank the Armory just for the opportunity to be involved with this project. It's been a very rich, rewarding process, and I'm very appreciative. So the essay that I contributed to this beautiful book is a biographical essay of Arledge, and it's fairly traditional in respect to that genre, in that it's essentially chronological, and it attempts to pin down the contours of her life, which seemed mysterious when I started. Where she moved, when, who she married, the rough dates of when she was institutionalized, how many times she was institutionalized, the birth and death of her child, etc. Her life story hadn't been written out, at least with so much detail before. So my priority with the essay was not to be especially artful, but to kind of ferret out the details and the context and confirm facts and set these down for the record. Because it's an artist biography, though, of course, the shifts in Arledge's practice are key to her life story. And unlike many artists of her time, there were many of these shifts and they were significant. Arledge had a kind of restlessness with medium. And maybe this restlessness is more common now, but it wasn't then. She had this kind of instinctual habit of finding the edge of various genres and pushing outward. So in school at UCLA, for instance, she studied sculpture, she studied dance, she studied painting, but then at the end of it decided to make a film at a point when experimental film simply didn't exist. And then the same year that film premiered, she found, or rather invented, yet another new medium, which was that of the slide paintings. So I'll read two sections from my essay. The first section describes Arledge's turn toward the slide paintings. And then the second section comes from an earlier point in the essay, and that's about her first trip to the American Southwest. To give a little more context, in the first passage, Arledge, she would have been in her mid-30s. She had a young child. She was living in Berkeley with her husband at the time. In the second passage, she was a recent grad of UCLA in her mid-20s, living in Pasadena. In both cases, she identified as a practicing artist, but in the younger version of herself, she was also this is what my evidence suggests, very preoccupied with communism. She was deeply involved in the Pasadena communist cells and was earning a living at the time as a substitute teacher. And then I'll say one more thing as a side note. The second passage mentions the painter Anita Delano. So Delano is unknown today, but she was one of the co-founders of the UCLA art department. And she had this extraordinarily progressive vision for the arts in Southern California. Her colleagues tended to be much more provincial, but she was a staunch advocate of the avant-garde and nurtured friendships with architects in LA like Richard Neutra and Frank Lloyd Wright and Rudolf Schindler, and maintained correspondence with the painter Robert Delaney and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. She was at UCLA for her entire career, but it was a difficult time, partly or maybe entirely because she so amply exceeded the purview of a lady painter. So I'll just say she seems to have been a remarkable person, and Arledge was very lucky to have had her as a teacher and, as I'll read, as a friend too. So let me turn to the text. Okay, I'll begin. On the heels of Introspection's premiere, Arledge was browsing in a store for teachers and saw some glass slides. They were larger than a standard slide, 3¼ by 4 inches, and designed for use in science lessons. A specimen could be projected for class. Arledge, who loved puns, described this moment as one of, quote, mounting excitement. She came home with a stack of materials and promptly began a new body of work. Arledge first painted on the slides with glass paint, and then she turned to stage light gels. Snipping off bits of gelatin, she warmed the scraps in the oven until they melted, and then shaped the labile goo with toothpicks, Q-tips, and toilet paper. When the gels hardened, she used ink, Sharpies, and glue to add color and texture. She particularly liked the effect of smoking the glass with matches. Holding the slide above the flame, she might gather a blurry smudge of smoke, or a coating as dense and glossy as lacquer. When the paintings were finished, she placed another slide on top and bound the edges carefully with masking tape. Some images look like a spill of cellophane confetti, and others are more austere. A night sky with 2 moons and a chemical trail. Arledge's abstractions reference crowns and headdresses, pressed flowers, and protozoa, jellyfish, and spiders. The human figure occasionally declares itself. A woman confronts a 2-headed horse. Another wears a party dress and holds a pair of shears. A naked man pulls a woman through a forest. Arledge began showing the paint sometime in her early 50s. She invited friends over to sit on the couch and watch. It was as if she were projecting slides of a recent vacation, except her travelogue was of an interior journey, a heretical riff on tradition. The slides are now part of Arledge's archive, along with her carrying case and projector. They seem small and delicate, and some of the gels have cracked. It's difficult to imagine how the images appeared with the magic of a projector. Arledge once advised her viewers that this was a chance to, quote, take a bath in your dreams. I wondered at her phrasing, how an art experience could be anything like a bath. But then I imagined these living room projections. The slide would have yielded an atmospheric wash of color, and the painting would have flickered on the backs of people's hands. It was like a bath because it was immersive. Arledge had found a way for painting to become part of the air. Let's see. And now I'll read the second section. So, as a student at UCLA, Arledge studied under the painter Anita Delano, one of the founding members of the department. The two became lifelong friends after an extended road trip through the American Southwest in the summer of 1936, just after Arledge's graduation. Summer trips were routine for Delano. Her job at UCLA was demanding, and the department was provincial and misogynistic. When the month of June came around, she needed to decompress. The first time Delano escaped to the Southwest, it took her Model T a week to get to Needles, California, a distance of 250 miles, because there were no paved roads yet that crossed the Mojave. But the pleasure of autonomy was greater than the hardship, and Delano returned to Arizona and New Mexico to paint every single summer for 28 consecutive years. Bringing Arledge along didn't seem like a good idea. She lacked the practicality of a camper. Indeed, Delano later complained that Arledge was, quote, incapable of mastering basic outdoor skills, the kind of person who, quote, breaks everything she touches and, quote, can't keep a campfire going. Nonetheless, Arledge was an elegant companion, devoted to painting, and she had talent. The two women painted every day, setting up their easels wherever they happened to be, on the edge of the Grand Canyon, in Tucson or Santa Fe, or in Native American communities on and off reservations with which Delano had cultivated friendly relationships. Arledge's paintings from this trip depict covered wagons, sienna cliffs, adobe mesas, and women in colorful dresses with pin-tucked waists. She favored horses, which she painted almost like deer, a girth of flesh delicately balanced on spindly legs, hoofs as tapered as point shoes. I'll conclude with that.
Sasha, thank you so much. Your contribution to the book, I just want to speak for a moment about the thoroughness of your research and your ability to gather all these disparate stories. There were many stories that informed this. She did leave archives, and we did have BAMFA's support in looking at them. And of course, Terry Cannon, who I neglected to mention, passed away just weeks before the book actually returned from the printer. So, you know, a very decades long, you know, experience for him. He didn't, you know, of supporting and cultivating Arledge's work. He wasn't able to see the actual object in his hands, although he did. He obviously followed the process all along, and I'm mentioning him now because his stories were such an important part of kind of piecing together the narrative of Arledge that you did so wonderfully, thoroughly, and beautifully. So I just want to thank you again.
Yeah, can I say one thing, Ivy?
Please.
I
Yeah.
think Terry was also he was important in all those ways for sure, but he also played this role in her life where she had spent a very long time institutionalized and was kind of trying to settle back into her life. And then you had this young, like 20-something dude guy in Pasadena who was just fascinated by her. And so I think also his attention encouraged her. That's when she started sending work out again. She started making work. She compiled her CV. She got her things in order. And it was really him instilling, this fact that there would be other generations interested. So it was another, just like a really interpersonal way that he nurtured her. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That's lovely. And that nurturing and the intergenerational interest extended to Terry initiating the development of the Arledge Trust along with Mary and Marcia and Ed. So yeah, thank you for that important point. There are so many wonderful, important points. And yeah, thank you for mentioning that. We are going to move on. And I'm going to present some images now. I'll share my screen in just a moment with images compiled from the exhibition itself and some pages from the book and some individual works. And there is a loose sequence to these images and a logic that may not be apparent, likely won't be, but there's, it's an effort to represent a fairly broad range of work and a range of stylistic approaches that one can see a logic build in, a logic can accrue. But they're not presented chronologically. So it's really to give more of an overall sense of Arledge's work. And there are also a few, well, as I said, there are installation shots. And so I will let those speak for themselves. And I will actually share my screen and read a text of some notes from, my goodness, let me see, excuse me a minute. Okay, here we go. Thanks for your patience there. At the time, the Armory Center for the Arts mounted the exhibition, Sara Kathryn Arledge, Serene for the Moment. I had been thinking about Sara Kathryn Arledge for 8 years, reading her texts, studying her paintings, visiting her archive, imagining her voice, and contemplating her many brief statements, such as this. No, I'm not you, and you're you to me. I'm sorry, let me start over with that. No, I'm you to you, and you're you to me. You're me to you, but simultaneously, I'm me to me. Arledge was an avid writer. Her writing included essays, poetry, scripts, a memoir, and notes. The quote above, and those throughout this text, cite her brief statements, musings, observations, and theories jotted in her shaky Palmer method script on loose leaf memo pages, the kind once purchased from a 5 and dime. Sara Kathryn Arledge, born in 1911, died in 1998, was a prolific painter who is better known as an innovator of mid-century experimental cinema. Incidentally, these are the slides and the projector that Sasha referenced. Born in the Mojave Desert, she lived most of her life in Pasadena, California, where she worked at the margins of the art establishment, creating a diverse and experimental body of work that operated in the space between painting and film. In her own words, quote, "My plan was to extend the nature of painting to include time." Arledge's reputation as a pioneer of cinedance, which combines avant-garde dance with film editing techniques, stands largely on her film Introspection, started in 1941 and completed in 1946. She later created unique environmental experiences by producing immersive light shows of projected handmade slides, paintings on glass, that reveled in her proto-psychedelic sensibility and love of vivid colors and organic shapes. Throughout, painting and movement were at the core of Arledge's self-identity as an artist. Collectively, Arledge's artwork emphasizes the eerie and the mundane, an ecstatic and vibrant energy, and the disorienting choreography of life's sequences of events. Spanning a half-century of 20th century art history, her work was not as much surreal, with a capital S or without, as it was a representation of the incredulity of the real. Like Maya Deren, whom she met and to whom she has been compared, Arledge refused the term. Incidentally, and a subject for discussion elsewhere, because of her greater recognition, Deren is often assumed to have influenced Arledge, yet Arledge's earliest film work was produced at the same time as Deren's, and the two were in correspondence during that period and shared their work with one another. It's unclear who influenced whom. Well-educated, yet disengaged from analytical criticality and professional ambition, Arledge nonetheless produced prescient works in all media that were recognized for their debates on sexuality, gender, and representation. They were steeped in an ambivalence towards spirituality and offered pioneering form and content to developments in experimental film. I would dream of an abstract picture, changing its shape. As a young artist just out of college, Arledge traveled with her teacher and mentor, Anita Delano, throughout the southwestern United States, as Sasha mentioned. There, she made her earliest known paintings, works on paper in watercolor and ink that are notable for their observational qualities, earnest academic approach, and early indications of her move toward abstraction. Through Delano, Arledge was invited to visit Native American pueblos where she studied landscapes, dwellings, and people, and paid special attention to animals, especially the black and white mottled camouflage of Holsteins. These, I'm backing up for a minute so you can see some of these. These visually contrasting bodies of work, some observational and others more abstract, reveal that conventional realism was not Arledge's goal. People always seem to seek something more interesting than life, she said. Arledge showed consistent fascination with representation of the body, moving throughout the decades from her earliest, most representational works to her later abstractions. Some of her forms feature exaggerated markers of gendered anatomy. Others are largely genderless and appear androgynous, reinforcing Arledge's own critiques of gender norms of the time. The fantastical anatomies she depicted in her paintings, along with the narratives in her films, particularly What is a Man and What Do Two Rights Make, were out of alignment with the political ideology of her time and continue to speak to ideas of gendered desire, sacrifice, repression, and liberation. The plays of light and form in Arledge's early works forecast her later abstractions on paper, as well as her kaleidoscopic film introspection, in which the disjunctive body parts of dancers create wholes, and whole figures are fragmented into moving parts. She always circled back to humanoid forms. She used the term humanoid in her notes, creating fantastical anatomies that speak to ideas of gendered desire, sacrifice, repression, liberation, and transcendence. Numerous works feature exaggerated markers of gender. Usually, I have nothing in my mind, perhaps a color combination or shape. Then, as I work on it, things may appear to me. I decide whether to bring them out more clearly or leave the painting in an uncertain state. I do enjoy uncertain states of mind. Arledge was unafraid of color, of inconsistency, of technical limitations. In her paintings, she takes black ink to her watercolors to frame, paint over, and create a visual tension between the void and mystery of darkness and color. She seduces through color, through the media of ink and on paper and projected light, offering paintings of color, slides of vivid color, almost frenzied in moments of that color overlaid with black. Black becomes a character in some paintings, engaging with Arledge's lurid forms and ecstatic, vibrant expressions. Many of Arledge's works relate thematically to movement, transition, and a dreamlike passage of time. The references are apparent in her films, including her 4 stabiles, which recorded sequences of projections of her fragile paintings on glass slides. The films were a simplification of her light shows, which required her to transport the cumbersome medium glass slides and the unwieldy projector that you saw earlier. And she relied on her friends to operate that equipment for her. The stabiles, while easier to present in live context, sacrifice the immersive quality evident in the slide projections. Movement, back to that, is also the basis of the dynamic, impractical storyboards for her uncompleted films, Lions Don't Eat Lovers and From the Void or Out of the Void. It is my ardent desire to see Lions Don't Eat Lovers and From the Void or Out of the Void produced as performances for film. And if anyone hearing this is interested in working with me on making this happen, please let me know. I welcome that support. Arledge's contortions of time and space through the bold claims and quiet tensions of her abstractions of forms, figures, and landscapes have been compared to the works of surrealist painters and filmmakers. But the iconoclastic Arledge took the path of greater resistance and rejected the affiliation that might have brought her broader acceptance and recognition. She did not believe in the surrealist precept of the unconscious mind directing action. If your behavior is rooted in the past, it may obstruct the motion of the present, she said. Rather, she held that time itself is a medium, one that is understood through individual intersubjectivity, that is, an understanding of oneself with respect to the other. Her representational and imaginary forms, internal and external landscapes, indications of absence and presence, and tangible and metaphysical voids are better understood as representations of a consciousness about the incredulity of the real. People always seem to seek something more interesting than life, she said. In art and life, I have fled any certain conclusions. As soon as I know the plan, I quit, and I move on to something more absorbing and interesting. That's a combination of excerpts from the text that I contributed to our book and some other notes that felt important to add. I want to acknowledge here the exhibition design by Braden Graeber. And I also want to make a correction to a comment I made earlier and acknowledge the support of Wendy Munger, rather than another member of her family, for the her support helped with the publication as well, and it was really quite wonderful. There was we were giving a presentation on the exhibition to a group, and she was a part of that group and came up afterwards and just completely surprised us with an incredibly wonderful and generous gift. So it was quite great. I want to bring now Kimberly Varela from Content Object into our conversation. Kimberly is the graphic designer of this book. She is an artist, and she is the founder of the award-winning Los Angeles-based design studio Content Object, which she founded in 2012. The studio produces content-driven, object-oriented work, specializing in book design and identity development. Kimberly's practice builds from a foundation of traditional printmaking, durational methodologies, and conceptual art, teetering the lines between play, resistance, academia, formalism, and a distinct take on materiality. She works with diverse clients and collaborators, including major museums, archives, artist-driven spaces, and community nonprofits. Her work has been recognized by AIGA and Design Observer, American Alliance of Museums, Book Industry Guild of New York, and Communication Arts, among others. Kimberly's work has been highlighted in the New York Times, Cooper Hewitt Design Quarterly, KCET's Artbound, and AIGA's Ion Design. So Kimberly, thanks for joining us. Thanks for this beautiful book.
Thanks for having me. How exciting to be here at this moment.
You talk about materiality. I know the name of your studio is Content Object. So you're thinking so much about the tangible physical objects that you produce, and this book, many of your books, and this book in particular, have such an incredibly rich tactile quality. The cover's embossed. There are different papers and different paper weights and textures. And you and I had a really interesting conversation about how you actually, a little bit of your process and how you assemble a book. Maybe you can, that's a really open-ended question, but maybe you can speak to it.
I'll maybe get a little bit more specific. I mean, the book is bound in this sort of special way because when I first received the text and I read Sasha's essay first, I realized, this is a piece that really meanders through her entire, oeuvre or career and life. And actually, Sasha, you use this term restlessness in Arledge's work, and I think I must have picked up on that because when I wanted to lay out the book, I didn't want to use a standard format of text and plates and like the traditional exhibition checklist in the back. So I'm going to try to do this over Zoom. We'll see. But Sasha's essay goes between plates and text. So clumsy, here we go. So on this page, you can see a plate page, and on this page is the text. And it weaves throughout the binding of the book. And so Irene's question to me was, how did you do that? So this might be way too nerdy and specific for, I don't know, but, at the risk of being hyper specific. Books are made out of 16-page signatures, which are 4 folded sheets of paper. So each folded thing has 4 pages to it, and that's how we get the 16 pages. And so what I did was work with the traditional 16-page signature, but then I took the text and I either had them wrapped around the outside of the signature, which if we had 2 like that, so this one I made purple so you could see the difference. Then you actually get, when they join together, 4 pages of text. Or if I took this one and I put it at the center, this feels very Armory to me, because you guys have a letterpress and stuff. So I'm just going all out. And I put it in the center, then I have 4 pages in the middle. And then if I put these 2 together, where this one is wrapped and this one is nested, that's how you get the 1-pager, which I think was really sort of perplexing, right? But it was sort of magical how it developed and how I could follow Sasha's essay with Arledge's images in a really chronological manner. And what I think was amazing about it is getting to the slides, getting to the films, that they just felt, you would think that would have been like later work, right? And so seeing it so early on, I think for me, what was amazing to place it alongside, these paintings she was doing with Delano of the Southwest. And yeah, so that was my little lesson on bookbinding.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I know it comes from a lot of knowledge and a lot of rigor, and it also has this super playful quality. I mean, that, it just created this beautiful rhythm throughout the book, and it also felt playful. In the exhibition, the the design of the exhibition had walls that were dark gray and then a kind of like almost salmon color. And that I don't know how literally you thought of it. It's funny, actually. We worked on this book for so long, and there are still questions that I find myself asking that hadn't occurred to me before. But I feel like the translation of that gray and salmon in the book was translated to this kind of like dark purple and pale. I don't know what you would call this color.
Yeah.
Peach.
Yeah, peach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if that was something you thought of, if you were kind of consciously making that correlation or not.
Well, I mean, I'm sure the exhibition designer picked it up from her work, and that's definitely, where I got it from. Like, if you, I don't know, Vic sort of blows these things out, but like this kind of hyper skin tone, there's this one page in particular, I should have marked it, where, let's see if I can find it. Well, even like these paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the dark purples, are really, I was so drawn to these like deep blacks in the series of paintings. And, when for Sarah McColl's piece, which were these sort of like deep, kind of dark questions, intense questions. And so there are these extended end papers. The end papers are made from a silver ink on purple paper, and they're taken from her slides. And then Sarah's text runs silver on that dark purple paper. And it just felt like this amazing sort of afterword, like having the last word in the book, and being, when you're in filmic spaces, you are in darkened spaces, and positive and negative light switch. So it's interesting playing with that with print, right?
Kimberly, I want to thank you. As I could just so keep going with you on this, but that's I'm going to jump on the segue here when you were just referring to how you dealt with the end papers and Sarah McColl's text. So I'm going to just go from there to a thank you, and go from there to introducing our next segment for this. For this book launch. The next segment is actually a pre-recorded reading of Sarah McColl's text being read by Sarah along with Kimberly Varela and Claire Phillips. Kimberly, you just heard Kimberly's introduction, so she needs no additional introduction. Sarah McColl, however, the author of the text, is also the author of the highly acclaimed debut memoir, Joy Enough, published by Livre W.W. Norton and Company in 2019, which was a Beltrist Book Club selection. Her writing has appeared in numerous publications, including the Paris Review, McSweeney's, The Guardian, and Story Quarterly, which nominated her essay on singer-songwriter Connie Converse for a Pushcart Prize. She's been awarded fellowships from the Malay Colony for the Arts in Austerlitz, New York, UCross in Claremont, New York, Vermont Studios Center in Johnson, Vermont, and the MacDowell Colony in Petersboro, New Hampshire, where she was named the 2017 Mary Carswell Fellow. She holds an MFA from Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, New York. And reading along with Sarah will be Claire Phillips, who is the author of the memoir A Room with a Darker View and the fantastic novella Black Market Babies. Her writing has appeared in Black Clock magazine, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and Motherboard Vice, among other places. Her awards include the American Academy of Poets First Prize, a nomination for the Pushcart Prize, and a notable mention in the Best American Essays 2015. Claire teaches writing at the California Institute of the Arts, or CalArts, the Southern California Institute of Architecture, or SCI-Arc, and UC Irvine, and is director of the Los Angeles Writers Reading Series at Glendale Community College. She holds an MA in creative writing from New York University and a BA in English from San Francisco State University. Claire read an excerpt of the Arledge memoir, Madness and Memory, which appears in the book, at the now defunct Rockhaven Sanitarium in nearby Montrose, adjacent-ish to Pasadena. The Rockhaven Sanitarium was founded in 1923 and it stopped operation, I think, in 2008, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was a sanitarium, I'll use that word, for women, and it's characterized by the Friends of Rockhaven as America's first feminist asylum. That's another thing that we can discuss another time. But before we start the reading, I just want to ask you, Sarah, I'm putting you on the spot here. We didn't discuss this earlier, but I don't know if there's anything you want to mention about the piece before we start with the reading. And if you want to just go right into the reading, that's fine too.
I think I would just say that I didn't have Sasha's text, and so I was also trying to piece together these bits and pieces of who this woman was, and I found her very inscrutable, and her love of puns is a good example of that. So I think it was sort of about my quest to understand who the person was behind this work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Quick question, Sarah McColl.
One of the traditional acts of art is to pierce through the hypnotic effect of the group of illusions we call convention. Sara Kathryn Arledge.
What is a woman?
In 1956, a woman is a person a husband puts in the car and drives to the Napa State Hospital. A woman is a person he leaves there.
They really thought me insane. The greatest irrational fear of my life had suddenly materialized. I was surrounded by nearly 100 crazy women.
I, a woman in 2019, find another woman, Sara Kathryn Arledge, a tough nut to crack. We both at least like to ask questions. I telephone a colleague. Hi, I say. I've called to talk about our mutual friend, Sara Kathryn Arledge. I am making a joke because she's trying to understand the same inscrutable woman. We talk about mid-century mental health. We use the words hysteria, which meant crazy woman, and schizophrenia, which meant major depression. By these definitions, I too am the hysteric schizophrenic. The treatment looks different in 2019. I sit in a sunny room at Beverly and Wilshire once a week. There are no electrodes. My colleague and I talk about electroshock treatment, and I think of the metal bobby pins Arledge wore in her hair when the orderly strapped her to a white table. While we talk, I look out the window. My hair is in a bun at the crown of my head, tightened with a stretched out elastic. I sit at my desk, which is in my studio where I make art. There's a palm tree in view. I sit 7 miles west of Pasadena, Arledge's last home. I hang up the phone feeling no closer to Arledge, but closer to my colleague. She is a woman mother artist, like Arledge. I wonder what she sees through her window and how she is wearing her hair, but I do not ask.
I thought of my life as ended. My hopes of ever reaching fruition as an artist were over.
That I can understand. To lose hope in the work is a death.
What is a woman artist? Women are taught to seek acceptance and approval from others and to follow compliantly the decisions made by their husbands and by society at large. Consequently, a woman artist's intense involvement with her work and her independence and assertiveness when executing it are considered unfeminine. A woman who wants to be an artist must continue to develop herself as an artist in spite of the conflict between the life of an artist and a life more acceptable by her culture's norms, in spite of a lack of support from her culture's ideals, and in spite of little encouragement from the art world itself. Barbara Cutley Freitas, She's a Woman, Journal of Thought, 1977. What is a man?
Sometimes I think a man is not so different from a woman. Sometimes I think a man is an unknowable alien being. In 1956, a man is a husband person who returns to the Napa State Hospital to give a crazy woman, schizophrenic wife person her paint.
My life would not be wasted here. I was allowed to paint.
Where does a woman artist work?
Good question. When does she work is a good question too, especially if there are children involved. An artist residency is fundamentally An artist residency is fundamentally not the same as a stay against one's will in a mental institution. But both, I'm loath to point out, keep the outside world at bay. Children stay home. On the ward, crazy women watch game shows and play checkers and are lulled into sleepy boredom with cabbage and pork chops and ice cream. But for Arledge, a mother, artist, woman person, she can work and think without interruption.
Freed from the agony of evil, of disturbed patients, of radio, and of the routine life of the ward, I began to paint. My former concepts about painting were gone. I really didn't care what anyone thought anymore. What difference did it make what my former style was like? I had finally found the place where I do what I wanted to at the moment, and I did. New forms emerged from my brush, new smoky color spread over the paper. I liked my work.
When I am at an artist residency, I like my work too. Without the clutter of grocery lists, appointments, dirty dishes, text messages, small talk, my brain expands. My creative self, woman, spreads. The world of my work on the page feels more real to me than the real world. I forget I have a body.
What is a beautiful woman artist?
When I was young, I was very beautiful.
I am young and beautiful enough.
The mirror's edge was marked with lipstick and cigarette burns. I saw my face. It looked old for 45. My beauty was gone.
I have seen 36-year-olds who look younger than I do. They tend not to have thin skin that wrinkles and reveals its imperfections. What an esthetician, someone with the occupation of beauty, called my cheap Irish skin.
What is an old woman artist?
An old woman is a young woman in disguise. This serves to keep the men away while she concentrates on her own interests.
What are my interests?
Love, art, relationship, the psyche, the soul, the unconscious, symbols, sex, creativity, creation, birth, female rage.
What is infidelity?
In 2018, I was very worried I might not be enough to keep the attention of the man I loved, that thin skin. One year, it doesn't matter if it was in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, Arledge's husband drove her back to the hospital.
He said, "I have something to tell you." What? I said. One thing was for sure, nothing he could tell me would make me feel worse than going back to the hospital. "I found someone else," he said. "Do you sleep with her?" I asked. "Yes," he said.
In 2019, I am coming to terms with the fact that no one person can govern another's desire. Desire and longing are free-floating and boundless, like sound waves. The man I love is a musician. Perhaps that is why the metaphor comes to mind. One person cannot govern another's desire, but they can occupy their mind, invasive as an army.
Was I really psychotic, or had my husband railroaded me in? He certainly had me committed when I refused to commit myself. What had I done to deserve commitment?
Her husband dropped her off and returned to the woman he slept with. She returned to her paints.
What is commitment?
To commit is to entrust, to unite, to connect, to bring together. To commit is also to perpetrate a crime or to consign someone to custody, as to a mental institution. In the 1530s, commitment came into use as to trust oneself completely to. Union, crime, and devotion share the same language. Marriage, suicide, insanity, and fidelity are close etymological cousins.
What is love?
An artist who likes her work is in love. She is in love with herself, the creator of the work, and with some other mysterious, untamable force, the creative principle. Creative work is of her, birthed out of her. The artist then finds herself in an elegant, self-contained love, a love of the self in relationship with the creative unknown. If the great love for the artist is the work, then the great tragedy Arledge knew when she was an old woman in a loose dress like a housecoat, looking like she should be stirring a pot of spaghetti. The tragedy is not to lose the human man person who leaves or longs to leave. It is to lose hope in the work.
What is hope?
In 1950, Arledge begins to plan What is a Man? In 1956, she writes the script. In 2018, I begin to write a novel. It's about a mid-century female artist's crisis of faith in romantic love and her enduring relationship with the self and with art. But sometimes I wonder what difference a few decades make.
What is a Man is a satire with undertones of the cosmic spirit.
What is the cosmic spirit?
In 2019, my therapist says I am very angry. You have the power to create, he says,
Wow.
and you have the power to destroy. I visit the galleries again and stand before Arledge's paintings, searching and still unsettled. I feel alienated from her work, disturbed.
Untitled, fetus shapes, abstract with black, two figures on red, plant life, abstract.
Even life forms, an egg, an ovary, follicular tendrils, the curves of the humanoid body float in the blackness of the void. In her work, Earth confronts the nothingness of the abyss. Human creation still requires two.
Instead of answers, I found uncertainty. I do enjoy uncertain states of mind.
I ask questions for the pleasure of discovery, but I wonder if Arledge asked questions for the pleasure of letting the unknown hang there, like the dangling sword of Damocles.
What is a man?
Arledge's second film, What is a Man?, follows the female character, Somebody Elsie, as she interacts with men in positions of power, car salesman, a doctor, a shrink. Somebody Elsie likes to ask questions too, and each answer arrives as a riddle, nonsensical, sending her off in search of another answer from the next man.
What do I do now? Will I die? May I leave the womb? What do I do now?
People would rather kill each other than watch my films. At least more of them do.
People would rather watch television than ask questions. Does it matter? Does the artist need people?
In creating film, I use my whole self, eyes, feelings, intuition, and critical intellect.
Writing, I use my whole self, eyes, feelings, intuition, and critical intellect.
I love living. I love and I'd love to share it, this, with an unknown, not yet created individual.
I love living too. Sometimes when I remember I have a body, I begin to weep. This is beautiful and ephemeral and will not always be mine. Forever concerns me. I'm bothered by endings. But beyond the blackness of the void is love. It is the antidote to the abyss.
Life is magic, and I am part of it.
What is magic?
Art.
Thank you, Sarah, for that amazing conversation that you conducted with Arledge. And thank you, Claire, for reading Arledge's voice, and Kimberly for reading what we've been calling the narrator, the figure that provides a kind of structure within the text, just as you provided a kind of structure to the book. Sarah, should I put you on the spot again? Is there anything you want to jump in with, or?
There's nothing else that I need to say per se. It was fun collaborating in the reading because the text itself did feel like a collaboration with Arledge. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much. We are moving toward our final component of the evening, the Arledge-inspired art activity facilitated by Julia Orquera. Sorry, Julia, I need a tutorial on pronouncing your name, Julia Bianco. But before we start with Julia, I just want to do a quick acknowledgement and extend thanks to my colleagues at the Armory. All of my colleagues at the Armory that have been so supportive of this project all along, starting with our executive director, Leslie Ito, and Eber Rodriguez, our exhibition program production manager, who kept the production of this book on track and offered incredible insight and support on the exhibition itself, and who's running this webinar, except for the goofy errors that I'm responsible for. But everything else about it, all the other smoothness, all the smooth part of it is his doing. And I also want to acknowledge Nicholas Orozco Valdivia, who's no longer at the Armory, as well as Annalisa Evangelista, both of whom were also very involved and supportive of this project. And I want to thank Mark Takeuchi, who did the portrait of Arledge that Claire, that accompanied Claire in Sarah's reading. So Julia, I'm turning this over to you now, and thank you so much. Oh, let me just give a little biographical information on you.
Go ahead.
Julia?
Thank you.
Thank you. Julia Orquera Bianco was born in Argentina and has lived in Mexico and the United States. In 2018, she graduated from the MFA program at Roski School of Art and Design at University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And in 2020, she gained a certificate on sustainability from the University of California, Los Angeles. And she is, as I said, currently a teaching artist at the Armory, as well as an artist and multidisciplinary practitioner. And thank you so much. I've enjoyed the conversations with you that we've had about Arledge's work and how to translate some of your inspiration into this short event this short activity we're about to do.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. I truly adore this book. I adore Arledge. It has been such a pleasure to tour her exhibition with during our field trips, and now, without further ado, I will just go over some of the materials that you may have at hand in order to do this Arledge's inspired by work. So there are some options for background. This is just, as you see, like some sort of manila paper kind of envelope. This is an option. I'm just gonna go over all the options. I have some, it's not wax paper, it's parchment paper from my kitchen here, in case you would like to make a transparency. And one of the other options is just black construction paper. I am actually going to sample on this one, but you're more than welcome to use whatever you have at home, even like a white sheet of paper, that would also work pretty well. So let's see, this one is for the background, and I think, just trying to see where should I be. Okay, there. I hope everybody can see this screen. It looks lopsided, but I think we will be fine. And then the second piece of paper that we need can be either regular paper, construction paper that is a light kind of color. So I have pink and yellow here. Probably will go for the yellow because it's very bright. And then lastly, maybe some scraps of paper that you have around, maybe construction paper, maybe magazine, etc. So have them at hand. We'll use glue or tape if you do not have glue, but I would suggest glue stick is the best, and scissors. And then lastly, we will use either oil pastels, color pencils, or here they are, markers, color markers. Whatever you have at hand, it's going to be really okay. In my case, I am going to use the oil pastels because I love the texture they leave. And I am going to demonstrate here. Let's see. So the first step is to actually think about just a freestyle kind of composition, maybe picking bright colors, and thinking maybe about Arledge's abstractions, how much texture, what are the patterns. Of course, this is going to stem from your own imagination. We're not trying to copy anything. So I'll just freely start drawing organic lines here. Maybe I will just make some shapes here. And I am not thinking about composition at the moment, and you will see why just in a little bit. Maybe changing the line, creating some patterns that then create rhythm, and alternating that around the page. Let's see what else. And there, for instance, I'll try to fill out this sheet of paper with textures, colors, patterns. They don't have to make sense. Okay. Really depends on what you're using, that it's going to dictate the texture. All right, so we have a little bit of limited time, but this is why I'm going to move forward to the next step. So say I am content with this. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to get my scissors, probably maybe divide it. As you can see, I'm letting a little bit of, I'm not really controlling much of what's happening. I still don't have an agenda. So I'm folding now a piece of paper, and let me just go back. I have this rectangle, and then I am going to fold and fold. And then I am going to fold like this. This is just one option. I am going to show you how to do this. So I already folded it. This is the center of the paper, and I'm just going to go in, and again, no agenda. I'm just letting it be. Okay, so as we know, when we do this, we create very random shapes. This is really up to you. The idea of folding it has to do with having shapes that we do not control. This actually looks like a mask. It's pretty interesting. And then I have these little ones here. So let me see. Let me show you how this is looking. Okay. And then we have our negative shape. So what's left? And I still have a ton of paper, so that's good. What I like to do with this negative shape is actually to go in and cut it again. Arledge's work has a very wide variety of organic shapes, which is one of the things that I actually enjoyed a lot. And I am doing this, I am making this while I'm speaking, and I hope that you are making it too. Okay. If I want to go back and find or make more shapes, this is another thing that we can do. We can just fold everything in one direction so that I have like a little bit of an accordion situation here. And now I'm thinking a more elongated kind of creature or thing. And I'm just cutting out stuff here. Check that out. Interesting. Okay. And then for this one, oh, I have some extra things coming out here. Okay. And then maybe you do want to go in and say, I want like heels or heely kind of shape. So I will, instead of folding, I like folding because I really have no control. I don't know what's going to come out of it. But say now we have a lot of organic shapes that are pretty interesting. And then I can think about maybe I have some construction paper here. So I would want to have some of those with me. Even some translucent parchment paper, why not? Tearing it, it's a good idea. So now I have all these elements, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start assembling my collage, and I will do this a little fast so that you can see something finished. And I hope that you get to make this part and see how it looks like. I'll start with this part. Again, you can make this either on black paper, which is going to resemble some of Arledge's work itself. If you make it on parchment paper or translucent paper, you will actually get transparency that you can then try against your window or a source of light. Okay. And maybe some more elements. So we're just building an abstraction that is inspired by this wonderful artist. There. I think I want one more. Maybe you can always add more. I think this is the final touch. Overlapping, bunching them together, separating them, working with transparency. There's a ton that we can do without a ton of material, actually. So I am actually pretty content with this one. Here. So let's see. I'm just cutting out the ends, and then this is my finalized, my finalized collage, inspired by the wonderful abstract work by Sara Kathryn Arledge.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to show you what I made while we were sitting here.
Please.
I didn't have any black paper, so I used a grocery bag. And I didn't have any other colored paper, so I just used white paper from the printer that's next to me and colored it in. So it's really making do with what I have. But what a great way, what another great way to think about her work and think about her as we're thinking about her work. And yeah, it's just a whole other kind of embodied exercise that allows us to kind of experience this artwork in a whole different way. Thank you so much for that.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And we are actually a little over time. I want to thank all of the participants for your incredible contributions this evening. I feel like we should all come up one more time and give a wave goodbye to our audience. Thank you so much, Julia and Kimberly and Sarah and Sasha. And of course, thanks to Claire, who couldn't join us tonight due to a conflict. But I want to thank all of you, and thank you again, Eber, for everything behind the scenes and helping this run smoothly. Again, to those of you present, the book is available through the Armory. We put the link in the chat. Please support us and the Armory, and thank you so much. Good night, everyone.